Philip, this is fantastic. Thanks for our discussion ahead of time. Pleasure to reconnect with you. We've had a couple of discussions here and there, and mind blowing. It's an honor. It's a pleasure to have you here. You know, you were asking about the studio. Yes, it's the Construction Life Studio. Manny Neve is such a generous human being. Use this place when you need to. So that's what brings us together today out of here. It's so comfortable. All that to say, appreciate you. Thanks for being here. There's so much about you, and we're going to unpack what there is to unpack for our audience there. Yet I want to start with something a little bit unorthodox, and it turbocharges our thinking patterns in our brains and gets us thinking differently. So I'm going to throw out a crazy, ridiculous question to you, and I just want you to answer it the way it shows up for you. All right? So here we go. The question for today is, how would you describe the color yellow to a blind person?
Man, you got to throw that blind person part in there. I was going to say, well, kind of like the sun, but man, I would just say brightness, joy. Yeah, that's all I can really think of. Man, that really threw me for a loop. Man,
Well,
just brightness, joy, warmth, things like that is how I would describe the color yellow.
thank you for that. Right, you know, kind of you were in a yellow shirt, so it kind of stuck out at me. I'm like, ooh, yellow, got it, right? And it's very interesting because our brains process information so differently all the time. I appreciate that. Now, I mean, let's just pivot right into you because there's so much about you, right? And today, some of the space you occupy is instilling confidence in people, teaching people how to speak better, have better confidence, be up on stage, be in front of people. There's so much there, and that's not an easy task. I mean, most of human beings are so scared shitless out of their minds, like, I don't want to stand up in front of people and talk. You haven't always been in this space. You've pivoted to this space. What's your story, man? Like, there's so much to you. So just what's your story?
All right, well, I got to go way back to really get this story started. It was back in third grade
Wow.
where I was
Okay.
just a super shy kid, never would talk. I had missed a day of school. I come back from school for missing the day, and I asked my teacher, hey, what did I miss yesterday? And she looks at me dead in the face. Oh, you were out? I could not
Mm,
believe my third grade teacher. You would think, and maybe she was sarcastic. I don't know to this day, but she didn't know I had missed the day of school.
my
And
gosh.
fast forward to high school, I started kind of coming out of my shell, but it was really only with my friends. I was still shy. I was still introverted for the most part, except for around people that I was comfortable around. When I got to college, I wanted that to change. So everything except for my intimate relationships, I was very confident in. When it came to talking to the opposite sex on trying to just say, like, hey, you want to go out on a date, things like that, wouldn't talk.
Okay.
And I just realized how speaking limited my life throughout my years. Finally, the catalyst came when I was in a oil and gas job in Statesboro, Georgia, where I had this manager just constantly talking down to me, just constantly saying that I needed to do more, although I was doing 90% of the work in the engineering department. And I just didn't have the confidence to stand up for myself. And that was the catalyst for me to say, enough is enough. I was tired of being that person that was talked down to, yet I was doing all the work. I was the right person for the job, but always got overlooked. And I decided to make that change. And through making that change, I found how much speaking and communicating really helped me out. And I started to notice how it was impacting other engineers. Fast forward a few more years, I'm working for BMW Manufacturing, and I had this opportunity to go to the leadership and professional development role.
Hmm.
Now, I've been doing podcasting for a couple of years now. I've been doing video content on social media for a couple of years as I was at the time building out a fitness coaching business. Realized that wasn't a passion for me. So I was trying to find that next little thing, and I was thinking leadership coaching.
Okay.
And I got into this role at BMW, and I got pigeonholed into professional development skills. And one of the things they said is, hey, Philip, come up with presentation curriculum. And that's where the light bulb went off. I've had all this experience of not being a good communicator, learning how to communicate, seeing how it's changed my life. It still had a little bit of that imposter syndrome when it came to leadership, but I knew that presentation skills was something that I could excel at. I've been doing it, and of course, there was room for improvement. But BMW identified this need, and they're a rather large company
Yeah, yeah.
worldwide. And that's where I decided I'm going to start a business around this and help others out. And from that point, that was about 3 years ago. I officially LLC'd a little over 2 years ago and decided to start helping people with their speaking. So started speaking on stages myself, started helping people prepare to speak on stages, and working to get into companies to help their teams out. Have had the opportunity to help some companies currently, but really trying to develop that out as well. But in a nutshell, seeing how I overcame my own introvertedness, my own shyness, and how speaking impacted my life in the corporate career, in the business life, in my personal life, I wanted to be able to help others be able to be better speakers too, so they could transform their lives.
Got it. Thank you. There's a lot there, and some of which we might go back to unpack. But what's buzzing around for me right away is, okay, so what's the biggest thing you learned through all that, and what do you share with others? Like, yeah, I'm gonna stop there because there's another question. But stop. So, what do you learn, and what do you share with others?
What I learned is that communication is about understanding where the other person is at.
Wow. Okay.
For an example here, and I'll make this brief. We had this ant infestation one time at the house, and we've got a dog food bowl, which is in the breakfast nook area, and then we've got the dog food container, which is in our laundry room. They're
Sure.
not too far apart, but they are separate. And I told my wife one day, because we thought we had gotten rid of all the ants, like, oh my gosh, there was ants by the dog food. And in my mind, I'm saying dog food container. And then all of a sudden she comes 30 minutes later, oh my gosh, there's also dogs by or ants by the dog food container. I'm like, that's what I said, but I didn't say that. And while that's a silly example, that's what happens all the time for us in communication. We don't add that little extra detail of saying dog food container. We just say dog food. And we go with the assumption a lot of times, and this is not something that we try and do to sabotage, but we just say, I know this information. I just need to tell the bare minimum that dog food. But my wife didn't know that I was talking about the dog food container because that information was in my mind, but I didn't communicate that to her so she would know that. And that's what we do in everyday communication. We communicate based on the knowledge we have, not what the other person has or what we and it really is a little bit of an assumption, but we assume that they have. So I really like to look at it as we need to over communicate. So even if she knew about the dog food container and the ants, I still need to say, man, there's still ants at the dog food container, not just say dog food.
All right. May I poke at that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, let's go
So
for
what
it.
do you
I love
so what do you suggest then, right? So what do you suggest to sort of break that pattern and change the neural pathways that occur? Because that's what it is. It's a neural pathways occurring. Hey, I'm communicating. Listen, there's ants by the dog food. In your mind, you're saying, yeah, you knew that by the container, and without an appropriate amount of self awareness, that creates conflict. Because like, what are you talking about? I already told you. It's over by the dog food. So in your mind, what shows up? What do you do to sort of flip the script on that and say, okay, folks, here's how to interrupt that pattern?
I would say start to think about communication kind of like a standard operating procedure or a work process, workflow, whatever you want to call it, whatever you do in your business.
Sure.
When you're going through there, you make sure to list out almost excruciating details. And now, when you're communicating, you don't want to be in excruciating detail and explain to that extent. But when you're explaining or you're communicating something, you need to explain it in a way that somebody can pick up on what you're saying. Just like in an SOP or standard operating procedure, you put, hey, you need to copy and paste. You don't just say copy and paste. You might put Control C, Control V, or right click copy, right click paste, select paste with the left click. You're adding those details in there because you're not assuming that a person has that base knowledge. And so it's the same thing with our communication. We need to stop going based on the information we have and go based on the information that we think the other person might need to know. So, a good example would be an engineer to a leader as well. Leadership's going to know more about the big picture, but they're not going to know all the details. So, we don't need to necessarily fill them in on every single detail because they're not in the weeds, but we need to fill them enough in on the details of the weeds that they can then make the decision that we want. So pair that with what's the end goal with that conversation too, and explain it in that way that somebody that doesn't have that background information can now have it. So it's really about making sure you're adding details in that somebody who doesn't have the same exact knowledge as you can still understand what it is that you're trying to communicate.
I'm excuse me, I'm with you, and I think I'm with you, and I still want to deconstruct this ant scenario a little bit more because this is what shows up for me. You know, we have two wonderful children at home. Cassandra's 8 years old. You know, she's this tall, 3'8" or whatever it is, right? And I can just and Christian's 10 or 11 almost, and we're sitting there going, if I'm sitting there going, okay, man, there's ants by the dog food. Again, thought means he's got the self-awareness to know I'm talking about the container. But how do we even strip that back simpler? Because it's in those moments, like we're talking small chunks of communication. I love what you're talking about, the standard operating procedure. That landed with me, right? When I'm talking higher level, okay, background of relatedness, here's what you need to know. Here's where I'm coming from. We're going to stay out of the weeds. Here, cool. What have you learned over time when it comes to like keeping it super succinct and communicating? I love your ant scenario, and I think I want to start there. So I want to volley that back over to you. Like, what have you learned? What shows up? What do you suggest to folks out there?
I suggest to folks to try and add those little extra details in there. Yes, it's going to take a little bit longer to communicate that, but add that in there. Like I said, container versus bowl. Dog food container, dog food bowl. That can mean two separate things. And it's about, while in the moment it is kind of an inconvenience for you, like we've been talking about here, it actually becomes an inconvenience overall for everybody because now I've only said
Mm.
dog food, and if the person doesn't ask for that clarification, then you've got to go, oh, no, 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 I meant over here in the container, not the bowl or whatever. So you have to go back and explain more and have more of a conversation. So two sides of this. One, try and give those extra details.
Got it.
But if you're not 100% sure, this goes the other way too. So if you tell me something, Jonathan, I need to then ask a question for clarity. And
Beautiful.
too often we don't do that. We just got it, go on. And you just try and figure out as you go. And I think entrepreneurs and probably men as well
Yeah.
have this trouble that, oh, we'll figure it out as we go.
Well, this is so
Well, if you
beautiful,
just
right? Because it's exactly it's the self awareness just to peel back and go, may I seek some clarity here? Because how many times do we, you know, I'll put my hand up and say this first. I'm the first guy to say something. You know, my wife is talking to me, and I'm like, got it, I got it, I got it, I got it. I didn't really get it, but right now, what I'm saying, what I'm demonstrating is that I don't have the bandwidth right now to hear what you're saying. Let me finish this task and move on, and then I'll come back to you, right? But there's the seeking clarity, just to say, hang on a moment in time. Can I seek some clarity? Or right now, I'm not listening to you right now. We'll come back to that, rather than just saying, you know, dog bowl, ants. Right now, hang on. I want to seek some clarity because right now I'm a little bit distracted. So this is really cool, right? What you're saying. Ask for clarity, folks. Is this what you really mean? Because that would have really changed the conversation for you. Oh, there's ants. What do you mean when you talk about ants? Do you mean ants by the dog bowl or ants in the laundry room? That would have changed the whole conversation, right?
Exactly, exactly. And so that's the thing. That's why I say both sides need to work on that. So for us, we need to reprogram our neural pathways,
Mm.
as you were saying there, to one, make sure we give those extra little details because we want to make sure we're not assuming that the other person has all the knowledge, which is up here in our heads. And everybody does this, so this is a natural thing. So we need to start giving that extra knowledge and extra information. But then on the other side, when you're receiving instructions, in receiving knowledge, you need to ask the question, stop assuming,
Yes.
because we know the old adage what that means.
Yep.
Is so you need to ask the clarity questions. And this is actually not something that sometimes people are like, oh, well, you're just being a jerk about it. No, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. And this is what good communication is, making sure that everybody understands that. And you, as the person giving the information, you can even say, and we'll go back to this example, it just obviously this you would not say it this way, but hey, you understand that I'm talking about the dog food container, right? Not the dog food bowl. Obviously, in that example, that's really sounds like you're
But you're adding
condescending to the
additional
person.
details, though, is what you're doing.
But yeah, yeah. But what I'm saying is like, hey, there's ants by the dog food container, and then you come back at the end of the conversation, da 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 da. You finished up, and so by the way, just so you know, there's still ants over there by the dog food container, and that's what you can do in a more complex situation. In a small, non-complex situation like that, just saying dog food container should be enough. So you don't need to repeat at the end. But that's something I like to do in my communication as well, is reiterate something that's important at the end also, which is something else we have to start doing. But you start to give information, give extra details that maybe at first you didn't think were necessary, but it will help to create less confusion. And if there's something very specific that you want the person to do based on the conversation you've had, make sure, ask a question or say, so just so you know that there's ants by the dog food container, not the dog food bowl, just
Right.
so we're clear. Something like that. So you can actually restate what you're saying just for extra clarification. Because what I've noticed doing that on more complex topics, people then are more likely to ask questions versus if you say, is that clear? Yeah, yeah, it's clear.
You're right.
So you need to ask something more specific. So you remember that the ants are by the dog food container, right? Yes. Or so or where are the ants at? Oh, they're by the dog food container.
Mm.
So you're trying to get a response back based on what you said, perhaps. So those are some things I like to do when it comes to communicating, trying to reiterate the thing that I've communicated to them, or even ask a question at the end in a way that I'm kind of asking a clarity question to them because maybe they're not comfortable asking that. And so it depends on the person, but you could
Yeah.
actually even ask a clarifying question in a way for them to give you an answer that lets you know whether they actually understand the instructions or not.
I love that, right? Like, end the thought with, hey, so, it could be as simple as, hey, so are we clear, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
with a little bit more detail. But here's what shows up for me, and I want to ask you this from your experiences. What do you see that holds people back from asking clarifying questions? So in other words, like, Jonathan, I know we're beating this one up, but we're gonna stick with this. There's ants by the dog bowl. Okay, got it, right? In a personal or professional scenario, without seeking clarity, there's a gap in communication there. Like, what have you learned, or what do you see more times than not that holds people back from engaging in further dialogue?
It's really pride or ego. Nobody wants
Mm.
to feel stupid. Nobody wants to feel like they don't know, they don't understand. So they'd rather save face up front and just, okay, yeah, I got it. And then not know what they're doing rather than saying, actually, I don't understand that. Can you
Right.
can you explain that more to me? Or hey, I don't know what that acronym means. Can you explain what that acronym is?
Yeah,
Even though it
there's a
may
good
be
one.
an industry acronym, let's just go with LOL. Everybody knows that laughing out loud,
Yeah.
which I always say that's probably one of the only that and JK, just kidding,
Yep.
are probably the two acronyms that you can use. Otherwise, you need to be saying them like SOP. You and I know what an SOP
Yep.
is, but there's a lot of people that don't know that. And that's a lot of times where we get in this trouble. Oh, the SOPs that are over there. And people are like, okay, yeah, yeah, I'll go get the SOPs out of that file directory or whatever. And they're like, I don't know what SOP is, but I'm not going to ask because
Right.
it sounds like something I should know. So that's why I say go ask that question. And people, they want to save face. They don't want to sound stupid asking the question, but really you're actually stupid when you don't ask it because then it's like you wasted 2 weeks and you didn't even know what an SOP was. I could have told you in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So you're not really saving face, and now people are more frustrated because of that.
Yeah, and it gets down to, so just uh, checking your ego, kicking it aside for a second, because it's not really about you. Um,
Yeah.
so this might lead to something. I came across where you've mentioned in the past, buy back your time. Where's the origin of that? What do you mean by that? Where'd that come from?
So it's actually a book. I cannot remember the author's name. I think he came out with it in the last year, maybe 2 years. But essentially, from that book, and I haven't actually read the book myself, I've had a lot of friends that I trust that have verified that's an amazing book. And from talking with them, the concept behind that is literally what it says: buy back your time. So that's either finding somebody like such as a virtual assistant, or hiring somebody to
Mm,
start doing tasks, or finding ways to automate the things that you do in order to be able to literally buy back that time. And that may be through actually handing somebody money, or maybe it's exchanging of services, but a way that now you can focus on things that are more valuable to you or that you just enjoy. For instance, let's say video editing. I've got a virtual assistant that helps me with my virtual, or not my virtual editing, with my podcast editing. He
sure.
does my video and audio editing, and he's way better at that. And because he's a virtual assistant, and he's in the Philippines, he does cost less than I do per hour. So there's that aspect to it as well. But on top of that, if I was to do the same video quality content as him, the editing and everything, it would take me probably 3 or 4 times as long. So even if we were the same hourly rate, I'm buying back 3 to 4 times
Got
the
it.
amount of time it takes for him to do that. Not to mention, yeah, I'm paying him for X amount of hours, but now I can go do something else during that same time. So that's what that buy back your time concept is about, is staying in your zone of genius, doing the things that are best for you in your business or life to move you forward, and allowing somebody else to do things that are not quite as important but still need to be done for your business.
So when did you recognize that for yourself?
Well, I was kind of forced into it a little bit. I started realizing that I was having to spend a lot of time on doing the podcast editing and all of that. And I knew I needed somebody. And I also wanted to build up my content quality. So I decided, you know what, I need to get somebody that's dedicated to this to be able to focus in on that. And as my family started growing, that time started to shrink
Mm,
more and more and more for me. So I needed to be able to give that to somebody else to be able to focus on that. And it's always an awesome thing, an awesome feeling that you've got somebody in the background doing something for you while you're focused on something else. But I really found that I was starting to have time constraints to do things that were going to be money making activities for me and my business, as well as family activities, to be able to spend time, quality time with my family. And so that's where I started recognizing that I needed to do something to make that change.
was there a pivotal moment in time where you can recall that? Like it's you're talking about it today because there's a different version of you that's evolved and you're in a different space. Yet for the folks that are going through that, they go, you know, I need to, and there's another heavy word, but you know, I have to do all this, and sometimes we become like a horse with blinders on, where we don't necessarily see what's around us. Was there something like, you know, a metaphorical 2x4 that sort of hit you in the head and said, this is the breaking moment, that you missed an opportunity and it was like, I need to make a shift?
Yeah, it wasn't really metaphorical, but I started realizing that I would miss posting the podcast on time, or I would
Got
miss
it.
posting things on social media at a time that I wanted to. And so the consistency, which you know from being a content creator, consistency is an important thing, and not just in content, but really anything. People want consistency. And I started missing that more and more and more. And that's when I realized, okay, I've got to get somebody that can be dedicated to that thing. And as a solopreneur, as a small business owner, that's the hardest thing. We're
Sure.
wearing so many hats that we're not focused on one individual thing. But when you can start to get people to focus in on one thing, that thing can get really consistent. That quality can go way up. And so that was kind of the breaking point for me when I realized, wow, I'm either going to spend a lot of time to make this podcast amazing
Yeah.
and doing everything behind the scenes besides just doing the recording, or I'm going to hand it off to somebody so I can then focus on the podcast only, doing the recording only, hand it off after that, and then go focus on coaching calls and focus on prospecting and other things. And so that was kind of my breaking point, that I couldn't keep the consistency and the quality up enough for my audience, who has been gracious enough to listen to me
Yeah.
week in and week out. And so I needed somebody to take over that piece and be solely responsible for that.
Well, this is beautiful because this talks about the self-awareness, right? Where, you know, we become so over consumed with the task to complete. What ends up happening is like, I'm going to push this episode out that's good enough, right? Versus I'm going to engage with somebody who's much better than I am, right? And I can talk about this, like, thank you, Vanessa, who looks after all the work that I do, because I can push out stuff that's half-hearted or good enough, or I can give it to somebody else and say, like, amplify this and make us both look fantastic. And she does that. But you're talking about that, and this is interesting because you said something that I think I came across. I'm not sure where I came across it, but you talk about, you know, mental strength and I use it, mental emotional awareness and strength. And I think you had said something along the lines of, without mental strength, your physical strength is sort of, and I'm paraphrasing, is empty and meaningless. And I love that because it resonates with me. But I also know that, as you mentioned earlier, your fitness has been a big part of your life. And so when you talk about mental fitness, without it, you're not whole and complete. What do you mean by that?
So physical strength is one thing. When we think about physical things, they're easy, and actually kind of it pairs with my book, Mindset Over Motivation, where when you have that physical strength, it's good, it's flashy, just like motivation, it's good. It's something that we need, but if you don't have that mental strength, that mental fortitude, you're not going to be able to push through. Yes, when you first start running, you're telling yourself, you know what, I'm going to run a marathon today.
Sure.
And you probably get a quarter mile in, you're like, oh, man, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to run that marathon. Like, this is tough. But it's because your mindset, your mental fortitude started to break down already. Even just a quarter mile into the 26.2 miles, your mind has already started to get weak, even though your body may not be there yet. But at some point, your body is literally going to start getting weaker, and your mind has to keep pushing through. I can't remember who it is, but I think it was like a Navy SEAL. Maybe, I don't think it was David Goggins, but I think the Navy SEALs kind of talk about this concept that I think it's like 20%. I don't know what the percentage is, but when your mind starts to say you need to stop, you're only at like 20% of your physical limitations. So your mind is what's literally telling you stop, because of course it's trying to protect you, and there's other scientific stuff behind that. But your mind can also push you through. And so if you don't have a strong mindset, you're not going to be able to do the things that you want. Let's go with cake. I love chocolates. I love sweets.
Sure.
And I succumb to them all the time because in my mind, I allow my mind to play tricks. Oh, you know what? You're not on a diet. Oh, you're not in that bad shape. Da, 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 da. I'm telling myself all these things in my mind. Oh, well, you know what? You haven't had one in a few weeks, whatever. The thing is, my mind tells me it's okay, even though my body doesn't need it. But my mind is the one that breaks down. And so the more we can build up our mind to not break down, to give in, to waver, the more we're going to be able to accomplish in life. I just heard about Elon Musk, how he had said, like, to the board members, he was going to take like a minimum, I guess he wanted to take no salary. California made him take like a minimum wage salary for 6 years. And if he reached all the goals, he would get $55 million for the company, that is. And if he didn't reach all the goals, he would get $0 or minimum wage, since California forced minimum wage, which was like $35,000 a year. So the $35,000 a year over 6 years, he's telling himself, I've got to make this goal. I've got to make this goal. I've got to make this goal. And of course, it's beyond just the financial aspect. But because he kept telling himself, I'm going to hit these targets. These are my targets. And his mind kept saying he's going to work towards it and figure it out. He was able, or they're still working through that. There's some funny stuff going on there. But he hit the target so he could potentially get the $55 million payout. And it was because of his mindset being there, because I can imagine somebody at that level, they are going through all sorts of struggles mentally, physically, emotionally, and yet he still pushes through because his mind is strong enough. And so that's why I say that you have to build up that strong mindset in order to overcome any physical or emotional limitation that you may have. The mind is going to be the first one to go, but it's also going to be the one that's going to carry you the furthest also.
Well, thank you for unpacking that. So what do you leave with the audience out there? Like, they're all saying, great, Philip, I got that. How do I do that?
this isn't something I coined, but Andy Frisella, who's the owner of First Form Supplements out of St. Louis, Missouri,
Mhm.
look him up. He's very, very popular on social media, over millions of followers. He's got a podcast called Real AF, and I want to say it's episode 16. Don't quote me on that, but it's an older episode where he talks about a power list. What he does is puts 5 tasks every single day. And why he does 5 tasks is that's something, and these got to be tasks that help move you forward in some aspect of your life. If you want to get into shape, put
Sure.
work out for an hour a day or something like that. You got to put these tasks on there that are going to move you towards your goals, not, hey, I need to go get groceries today, not simple things like that. But he puts 5 tasks every day. And when he accomplishes all 5 of those, he's won the day. Yes, he could go on and do more things, but he has to at least do those 5. And by doing those 5 things, he and others that follow this build up that confidence. So for you, you need to start finding, and it doesn't have to be 5, you figure out what's going to work for you, but figure out a few things that you can do consistently and do those day in and day out and build up that confidence. And the thing is, it could be that hour workout. Guess what? There's going to be one day, because this is on your task list, you have to get it done today. There's going to be one day, you know what, it's raining outside, or man, I'm tired, but it's on my task list. And if you write down at the end of the day as well, hey, man, I just did not feel like doing that workout, but I still did it anyways. You do that enough times, you're going to feel pretty awesome. You're going to start overcoming that self-limited belief in yourself. Your mind is going to stretch and grow and be able to overcome those things. And so as you do this over and over again, start taking these actions, these non-negotiable actions, that is, you're going to build that stronger mindset. So that's where I'd say to start. Just start with, I mean, even 2 or 3 tasks. But he says 5, so I'll say 5. Start with 5 tasks that are going to move the needle forward in your business, and do those and be consistent with those. And as that becomes a habit, let's say the working out thing, take that off and put something else on there. But slowly build up these habits by doing a task consistently over a period of time.
Thank you for that. So I love what you're saying there, and I become curious now. If I talk about you specifically, because we all go through this, when your brain shuts you down, you're like you're going for a heck of a workout that you know is gonna be mentally, physically grueling, and your brain is trying to keep you safe. What do you personally do? What flips the script and shifts it for you?
I'm not perfect at that.
Of course.
A lot of times that tends to be for me runs. Like
Okay.
I tell myself, and the biggest thing, and it's really just a mindset thing, is, hey, you said you were going to do this. You have to get it done. Because for me, I know if I tell myself I'm going to do something and then I don't do it, one time is not going to kill me. But just like that power list, if I start not doing it, so you got to be careful with this. Whatever you decide to set yourself to, you need to keep that up, because it can work the other way. If I keep only doing 4 tasks and I never hit 5 and I'm always having a loss, then it's also going to hurt me. So I always make sure that when I've decided I'm going to do something, that I'm going to do it. And I just have to push myself through. There's no real good answer on this. I just push myself through because I decided up front I'm going to do that. So
Yeah. So
going back to our marathon, if I said I'm going to run a marathon, unless if obviously I pull a tendon, or I fall into a hole, something crazy happens, I am going to get it done because I told myself I'm going to get it done, because I told myself. And so that's where we have to start, by keeping our own promises. And it's nothing personal. And I'm not the best
of
at that
course.
myself. And that's a limiting belief saying that too. I understand that. But I'm being vulnerable here and letting you know that, like, I'm not 100% at this.
No, you're a human
But I'm
being.
constantly, yeah, I'm a human being. I'm constantly trying to improve, but I do my best when I say I'm going to do this thing, that I do that. And so that's really what it comes down to, is just really deciding you're going to do it and doing it. And it starts with small things. It may not be that marathon. Like, hey, one day I want to run a marathon. Okay, I'm going to start with a half a mile run. Okay, I'm going to do a mile run. And as you're going through it, nope, you told yourself in the beginning you were going to do this. Keep pushing through. And I found on that other side, when I do push through, I feel so much
Mm,
better after that run or that thing, then whenever let's say I was going to do a 2 mile run and I ran 2 miles, had no issues, I didn't have to tell myself, you know what, you said you were going to do two, do two. I still feel good, but I feel better when I'm a mile into that 2 mile run and I'm telling myself, man, I want to give up. I want to give up. But I keep going because I had also told myself I was going to do 2 miles and I go do that.
Wow.
So do the things you say you're going to do, and it's going to make you feel better. And you're going to realize that. And as you build up that muscle, you're going to have that muscle memory. And remember, you know what? I feel a lot better when I do what I say I'm going to do versus not doing it and in the moment feel good. Just going back to dessert too. When I eat chocolate cake, I feel great in the moment. But if I'm trying to lose weight, I feel miserable
Sure.
later that day or the next day.
Yep.
But if I kept to my promise and didn't eat that chocolate cake, I feel so much better later that day and the next day than I would ever have felt in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a whole. This is so cool because you're talking about, first of all, honoring your word to yourself and keeping your commitment, and that I can sense it and see it and feel it as you're talking about that, how important that is to you. You know, you're a man of your word, and it starts with here. It starts with yourself. If you're not going to do what you say you're going to do for yourself, then how can you do what you say you're going to do for anybody else out there?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, especially as men, this is important, especially if you are in a marriage, in a relationship. I think about my dad, and I know plenty of other guys and girls that will talk about their dad. Their dad is the rock. He's the solid foundation in the family. And if you're religious, then of course God is
Mm-hmm.
beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
But within the physical family, it's typically the dad.
Right.
And so if you are not solid, if you are not keeping to your word as a man, and in women, this is still for you as well, but I want to speak specifically to the men here, then how can your family rely on you?
Yeah.
So going, let's zoom back out to everybody. If you are not keeping to your word, how can other people rely on you when you say, yeah, I'll get that done. I'll take care of that. Because they've seen time and time again that you don't stick to the things for yourself, let alone for them. So if you want people to trust you, you have to stick to your word, first of all, for you, but then, of course, for those that you say, yeah, I'll take care of that for you.
Yeah, yeah, I love this, and I want to add this, and it's not about being perfect. We're not going for perfection, folks,
Yeah.
right? We're going for recovery. It's also a matter of cleaning up your integrity when you mess up. Hey, listen, I had a commitment to you, and this is what occurred, and for that, I know that the impact on you, and I apologize. And here's sort of what I've learned and how we're going to pivot through it. Right? We're not robots. We have less than desirable moments, right? So
Yeah.
what you're talking about though is you know, you're getting down to the bigger picture of, you know, again, as a male, as the metaphor, as a protector, as a provider, as our solid role model. Who the hell are you to hold others to high standards if you're not going to hold yourself to the same high standards?
Exactly. I mean, that's leadership 101. Lead by example. So you have to be the example. You have to be doing the thing in order for other people to trust in you, to follow you. So do it. Just
Do
be
it
that.
anyways. Just do it anyways, right? Like, you
Yeah.
want to talk about rewiring your brain? It's super simple. Is do the thing your brain's telling you not to do. Right? It's like, hey,
Yeah.
you know, taking a cold shower sucks. Yeah, it does suck. Is it ever going to get better? No. You know what my brain's saying is, don't take a cold shower today. You don't need to take it today. Do it anyways, man. Do it
Yeah. I
anyways.
mean, it's just like getting rid of a bad habit. You were talking about the neural pathways and
Yeah.
everything. In order to fix the bad habit, to get rid of the bad habit, one, it helps to replace it with something good, but you have to rewire your brain. So it's about constantly doing this new thing. Let's say rather than smoking a cigarette, we're going to eat some carrots. I don't know. So
Yeah,
every
yeah, yeah.
time you have a craving to smoke a cigarette, you eat 5 carrots. Let's say, silly
Yep.
example, but let's say that's the new habit that you want. But every time you're like, you know what, it's gonna be all right. I'm gonna go smoke one today.
Yep.
You're building that neural pathway. You're ingraining that ditch. You're digging a ditch right back to smoking
Yep.
instead of into this new pathway, which is to eat carrots, to eat healthy. So we have to continually work on that and ingrain that. And I don't know the exact quote, and I know I've heard this before. We are brought down to our, now I can't even really think of it, but basically, kind of where we're prepared at. We perform at our minimal preparation level.
Yeah.
And maybe you know the quote a little bit better than me, or but wherever we're prepared at, that's where we're going to default to,
Yeah.
unless if we're constantly on top of our game.
Absolutely. I love
So
it. And I want to jump in here because this turbocharged me, and I say this so routinely, whether it's with, the work that I do or even with athletes. It's there's a misconception is during game day, I'm going to step up. I'm going to step up and show up for the game. I say baloney, folks. In a game day, when it's mission critical, when your brain sort of goes down to habit, routine, and ritual mode, what happens? You fall back to your highest level of training. So if I've only ever squatted 400 pounds, right, then you know what? It's not like, on game day, I'm going to squat 500. It ain't going to happen, folks. It ain't going to happen. You're going to fall back to your highest level of training.
yes.
Thank you for letting me jump in. I think that's what.
Thanks for saving me on that. I'm blanking out on what this is. I know what I want to say, but I can't think of what it is exactly.
Well, this pivots to something that you've said before, which is continue to talk about what you do every chance you get, and everything you want will eventually come to you. That's powerful. What's the origin?
Yeah. I think of this. I don't know where that origin came from. I guess it's just realizing as I've accomplished more things, and I look back and like, man, am I really doing this? Is this really real life? Like, did I really accomplish that? Like, it's just a cool feeling to think about. But I also think about, like, and this probably comes back to neuro-linguistic programming and stuff like that. But think about when you go and rent a car. You've rented a car that you've probably heard about before. Let's call it a Ford Fusion that's red.
Sure.
Well, I'm sure you've heard of a Ford Fusion before. It's a fairly popular car, and you've seen red cars before, but you never really noticed the red Ford Fusion until you rent that. And then all of a sudden you start seeing it everywhere. You're like, whoa, I didn't realize there was this many red Ford Fusions out there, or just Ford Fusions in general. But it's because now your mind is focused on that. So when we start to focus on things, when we start to talk about them, when we start to breathe about them, essentially live them out, all of a sudden it becomes a part of our reality because we've talked about it enough. We've worked towards it enough. We've thought about it enough that it eventually does become that reality because, and I don't know all the science behind it, but our mind starts wiring ourselves, and Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this in way more detail, but our mind starts to find ways to be able to find those opportunities and to see that thing in our life. So it really comes down to being focused and intentional on whatever it is that we want, and eventually it does come to us. It may take 10 years, it may take 2 months, but eventually it will come as long as you stay on that path and continue to focus on that thing.
Got it. So how have you incorporated that into your life? What have you realized?
For me, right now, it's getting on more stages. So I want to focus in on more stages, but then I have to take action behind that. So, okay, great. I want to get on stage and I want to speak. Okay, cool. I can do all the visualization in the world I want. I got a microphone. I see myself here on the stage. There's 1,000 people out in front of me, and I'm closing my eyes as I say this to act like I'm visualizing this. And then I think about what I'm going to talk about. What am I going to talk about? But until I actually start taking some action on that, all that visualization, while it's great, it's not going to complete the whole process. So what are some things that I need to take to get there? Well, probably one, I could create my own stage, go ask people if they've got a stage coming up, look for opportunities. But once I've decided on that goal, then I can start reverse engineering that and find actions that I can take or should take to help me get there. And the cool thing about this too is as you take one action and get closer towards that goal, you're going to find things that you didn't know at first that you'll need to find out. And that's probably maybe a follow-up question for you in your mind, or the audience is thinking this. Well, it's great. You got a goal, but how do I get there?
Sure.
It's by taking an action that you know that you should take. Hey, I might need to get a speech together if I'm ever going to speak on a stage. I can't just say, and unfortunately there's people that do this. Oh yeah, I'd love to speak. What are you going to speak on? I don't know.
Right.
Have a speech prepared. That'd be a great start. Okay, do you know their speakers? Maybe you talk to them. And then as you start asking these questions and looking and taking more actions, things become more clear and start to open up. And just as you were doing the visualization, just as you were taking that action, like the rental car, all of a sudden you're going to start seeing more speaking opportunities now because you're focused on that. And so that's what I'm doing right now, is finding those opportunities, doing podcasts like this, reaching out to podcast hosts like you, how we got set up for each other's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at event hosts, talking with them, talking with other speakers. Hey, how did you get on stages? How did you start speaking more? Refining my message so it can be clear and concise so people can know, oh, Philip can speak on this. I want him on my stage because he can help my audience with this specific thing. And so those are some of the things that I'm doing personally to get on stages. And so you can apply that to the thing that you want to do. Figure
So,
out what you want to do and start taking that first action that you can think of taking to get you towards there.
and you're so knowledgeable. I want to pull the handbrake for this one because I want to come back to that, right? Let's re-communicate that message, folks. Here's where, guys, listen, folks out there, Philip is available. Get him on stage. Get him in your boardrooms. I'm going to volley this one back over to you. Well, what's the, if you could talk about one thing, what's the most important thing that you want to communicate to the folks to say, this is why I'm great on stage for you?
I like to speak about building a culture of impactful communication. So it's not just about, can I speak well? Can I say the ums and the ahs? No, how do I speak to my team? So I like to speak with leaders to speak. So speaking to a leader, how do I speak to my team to get them bought into the vision and the mission of our company, or get them bought into this initiative that now we have that's been passed down from senior management? The things that I've seen too often is leaders they won't get that buy-in. They just kind of say, hey, we need to do this. And they're like, why is nobody wanting to do that? Why is nobody excited? It's because you're not getting them bought in.
Right.
So I really like to talk through strategies of how you can communicate more effectively and get that buy-in with your team to be able to move the business forward.
Thank you. And for the folks out there, I mean, if that didn't just lift sort of a weight off your shoulders, there it is, right? Here's this new initiative we have to roll out. Well, okay, so what? Now what? How do I do that? Right? I'm looking at the screen. It's right there. Philip Sessions. There it is, man. Like, you're going to get it. Here's how we're going to roll it out. Right? It's about confidence. It's about all the things you've talked to this point. So thank you for that. Right? And you said something else, and I just want to piggyback this thought too. It's, business doesn't grow until you do. Like, what does it actually mean to you when you hear that?
So kind of going back to what we talked about with, you have to build up your mindset. You can't run a marathon. Your physical body, maybe it is capable, but your mind is going to give up well before your body does or will give up. It's trying to protect yourself. So you have to continue to build that mindset up in order to be able to accomplish running that marathon.
Mm.
And the same thing with business. Until you learn, part of it's learning what you need to learn to be able to grow the business, but also part of it's learning, what do I not know that maybe I need to hire out? I can do video editing, but I'm not the best at it. So I hired that out so somebody could do that for me. Well, yes, I kind of could do it, but I couldn't go do more coaching calls because of that. So it's really about expanding your mind and understanding your limitations in order to be able to start growing your business. Not to mention, if you can't conceptualize the thought of having $1 million company, and so what's that, making about $120,000 a month, or sorry, whatever. So let's just call it $100,000 a month. Clearly, I'm not doing math well here, but if you can't conceptualize making that much money, how are you going to be able to do that?
Right.
And so you have to start expanding your mind to realizing that that is possible. How do you do that? By breaking that down. What does that look like? So you have $1 million a year. I guess it's like $88,000 a month or something like that you need to make in order to make that a year. What's that in a week? What's that in a day? What's that in an hour? Break it down in some way, shape, or form that you can start to conceptualize that. And of course, you need to go back. Well, how much does my product or service cost? How many of those do I need to sell in order to make this amount of money and everything? But you have to kind of have that goal and start to get the numbers together so you can conceptualize that. So you have to expand your mind to be able to wrap around this idea before you can continue to grow.
Wow. Thank you. boatload of information, like, and you've illuminated so much for us. So I'm truly grateful for that. Thank you. Thank you. I'm curious now. You've learned so much of yourself, and you consistently evolve, and you've shared so many stories of, something you recognized when you were in grade 3, which would have made you, 7 or 8 years old, somewhere around there, and how the evolutionary process, of Philip, as you've progressed and evolved through the ebbs and flows of life. And so for the human being that you are today, I'm super curious. I mean, if you can think back in the past, 3 to 5 years, what's a habit, ritual, or routine that you've incorporated and served you well and is worth sharing that might land with somebody else?
Reading. I mean,
Okay.
reading and in both my Bible as well as self-development books. And so I'll lean more on the self-development book side because we've been talking a lot about business mindset and stuff like that.
Sure.
But reading those books, I've been able to learn and take from what other people have already learned that they're sharing within that book for me to learn from. I glean upon that and I use that as a source of information that then makes me a little bit more credible in other areas. Plus, I've been able to learn that. And I've had people, I've built a business and I'm still building a business, but I haven't built a business to $1 million a year. Yet I've had people that have built $1 million plus businesses tell me, wow, you know a lot about business. And it's because I've read enough business books, I've been around enough people to learn that. So, but I would say that one skill that I've done over really more than the last 3 to 5 years, but that I started doing was really reading and then going and trying to apply that knowledge as much as possible is what's really changed my life to give me that self-perception and self-realization around me and be able to learn all the knowledge that I have.
Well, thank you for that. And sort of, what's your flavor for reading? Is it physical reading? Is it audiobooks? Do you highlight things? How do you what's your thing?
If I had to pick a favorite, I would say it would definitely be like Audible books, listening to them.
Yep.
But I do like to get a good solid book, paperback or hardback, or yeah, paper or hardback, and just read that as well. It does feel good going through. I try and do about 10 pages a day. So if it's a physical book, I can actually do that. If it's an audio, it ends up being more, but I'll listen to that on a commute and stuff like that. The automobile university, as I like to call it, but also listening to podcasts. So you're getting a lot more concepts that are uh, more real time, if you will, and
Sure, of course.
everything. More not evergreen. I can't think of the other time based content and everything. So you're really getting to learn a lot. And I try and go based on the things that I feel like I need to learn right now. So one of the things for me is marketing right now. I feel like I need to learn more about marketing, so I've been reading more books on that.
Sure. And thank you, right? And there again, self-awareness, folks, it comes back to, where do I want to, it's easy to, it can be easy to become distracted. Like, I want to learn a whole boatload of things. Well, why don't we pick one thing and start there for right now? Right. So thank you for this. Here's I think sort of the last question that circulates for me is, I want you to envision this, airplane flying through the sky with one of those wavy banners, behind it, and it's got a message, and it's one message, your message, one message you can share with the world. What do you want on that banner? What do you want folks to remember?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that it was a plane with the banner behind it. So that lets me know it's not a Boeing 737. So we're not going to fall and crash. No, but for the banner, what I would like for that to say is just start speaking today. I mean, it starts with your phone. Just starting to speak. You cannot imagine how much your life will change. And you don't have to be the best speaker out there. But if you are comfortable enough speaking in front of a group, your life can change tremendously. So my message would be just start speaking
Wow.
and you'll see your life change tremendously.
Thank you. That resonates in so many different ways. I can just envision it. Just start speaking. And that can be super simple. Like, just if there's a brain dump, you got to get out, just start speaking. It starts somewhere. Philip, it's an honor. It's a pleasure to share space with you. There's so much more about you. How do people get in touch with you? How do they learn more about you? What's the details?
Yeah, you can go to my website, speakingsessions.com, but I hang out mainly on Facebook and LinkedIn. So Facebook, The Real Philip Sessions, and
Mm.
that's Philip with one L, and then LinkedIn is Philip Sessions.
Yeah, and catch that one, folks. I made that mistake too. It's Philip with one L, right? So, Philip, thank you tremendously. Honor, a pleasure. I look forward to our world intersecting again. Thank you.